Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The island of Thalassa was as ancient as it was hidden, a sanctuary in the heart of the endless sea. To those beyond its borders, it was a myth, whispered about in sailors' taverns and passed on through generations as a story of magic and isolation. But to those who lived there, it was the only world they had ever known. A place where the elements bowed to the will of its people, and every citizen had their own gift, some more powerful than others. The island was home to three great regions, each tied to an elemental force: the coastal cities, where the sea dominated life; the highland cliffs, where wind ruled the skies; and the deep forests, where the earth's magic thrived unseen. But the time had come for the people to elect a new leader, a president who would guide them for the next decade. It was a rare event, and the island buzzed with excitement and tension, for the stakes were higher than ever before. Three candidates had risen to prominence in this election, each vying for control of Thalassa's future. The first was Mara, the sea witch, whose mastery of water was unrivaled. She was feared and respected by the coastal towns, her magic both a blessing and a curse. The second was Zephyr, the meteorologist, a wind wielder who commanded the highland cities. His campaign was based on freedom, on the promise of a future where everyone could ride the winds of progress. And then, there was Rook, the man with no powers. No one knew where Rook had come from. He was an outsider, someone who had lived quietly on the fringes of society for years, seemingly content to remain in the background. Yet here he was, in the middle of the most important election the island had ever seen, standing against two of the most powerful figures in Thalassa's history. Some called him a fool, others a visionary, but few could deny that his candidacy had stirred something deep within the people, something Mara and Zephyr had not expected. Rook had no magic, or at least, that's what everyone believed. In truth, his power ran deeper than any spell or incantation, for he was the island's secret. The force that lay beneath the surface, the very lifeblood of Thalassa's magic, was tied to him. But revealing that secret would do more harm than good. He couldn't let anyone know, not yet. The island's future depended on him winning this election without revealing his true nature. The campaign was brutal. Mara's supporters flooded the coastal towns with promises of wealth and prosperity, using her control of the sea to sway the fishermen and traders. Her presence was like a storm, rolling in from the horizon, unstoppable and fierce. Zephyr, on the other hand, took to the skies, his rallies held high in the mountains, where the winds carried his voice across the land. He spoke of progress, of a future where the winds of change would lift everyone to new heights. But Rook did none of that. He didn't have the luxury of magic to impress or intimidate. Instead, he traveled from village to village, meeting the people where they lived. He spoke to the farmers, the shopkeepers, the laborers who had long felt ignored by the elemental factions. He didn't promise them riches or power. He promised them a voice. Still, there were whispers. How could a man with no powers possibly lead an island built on magic? What did he know of the elements, of the deep connections that ran through the island's very core? But Rook didn't need magic to understand Thalassa. He had lived with it, been a part of it in ways no one else could imagine. And he knew that the island was on the edge of something dangerous. For weeks, strange things had been happening. Sudden storms would rage across the coastline, only to vanish as quickly as they had come. Winds would howl through the mountains, ripping trees from their roots, and then fall silent. The island's magic was shifting, reacting to something none of the candidates seemed to understand. But Rook understood. He could feel it, deep within him. The island was waking up. Its power, the power he had been connected to since birth, was stirring, and it was tied to the election in ways that terrified him. If the wrong person took control, if Mara or Zephyr won, it could unleash forces that would tear the island apart. And yet, he couldn't reveal the truth. Not yet. The people had to choose him for who he was, not for what he could do. If they found out he was the island's guardian, the very source of its magic, everything would change. The balance would be destroyed. As the election neared, The tension grew. Mara's campaign turned darker, more aggressive. She used her magic to demonstrate her power, sending waves crashing against the shore during her rallies, reminding everyone of the consequences of crossing her. Zephyr was subtler but no less dangerous. His wind magic was everywhere, carrying his voice across the island, making it clear that he was the future, that anyone who stood against him stood against progress. But Rook pressed on, his quiet determination winning him more supporters than either of the others realized. He didn't need magic to win the people's hearts. He needed only to listen, to understand what they wanted and needed. And more, they began to see him not as a powerless outsider, but as someone who truly cared about the island's future. Then, just days before the election, disaster struck. A massive storm rolled in from the sea, unlike anything the island had ever seen. Mara and Zephyr blamed each other, each accusing the other of using their magic to manipulate the weather for political gain. The storm ravaged the coastal towns, flooding homes and destroying crops. The winds tore through the mountains, leaving destruction in their wake. Rook knew the truth. The storm wasn't caused by magic. It was the island itself, reacting to the growing tension, the imbalance that had been building for weeks. And if something wasn't done soon, the entire island could be torn apart. He had no choice. On the eve of the election, Rook stood before the people, gathered in the capital's central square. Mara and Zephyr stood on either side of him, their followers tense, ready for confrontation. The storm raged around them, dark clouds swirling above the square, the wind howling through the streets. "I have something to tell you," Rook said, his voice calm but carrying over the noise of the storm. "Something I should have told you from the beginning." Mara's eyes narrowed, her hand twitching as if she was ready to summon the sea to strike him down. Zephyr crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips as he waited for Rook to embarrass himself. "I am not what you think I am," Rook continued, his heart pounding in his chest. "I have magic. But it is not like theirs." The crowd murmured, confusion rippling through them. This was not what they had expected. Rook had been the powerless candidate, the one who had won their support by being like them. Now he was claiming to be something else entirely. "I am the island," Rook said, his voice steady. "The magic that runs through this land, that gives you your power, say it comes from me. I am its guardian, its source. And if I do not take control, this storm will only be the beginning." The square fell silent, the wind dying down as if the island itself was listening. The silence that fell over the square was heavy. The air, which had been crackling with magic and tension moments before, now seemed to hang still. All eyes were on Rook, a man they had thought to be powerless, and yet he stood there claiming to be the island's guardian at the very source of the magic that shaped their lives. Mara was the first to break the silence, her voice sharp and filled with disbelief. "You expect us to believe that?" She scoffed, her eyes flashing with anger. "You, a man with no abilities, now claim to be the source of all magic on this island? It's absurd." Zephyr stepped forward, more curious than angry, his head tilted slightly as if he were studying Rook. "If what you say is true," he said, his voice low and measured, "then prove it. Show us this power you claim to have." Rook felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He hadn't wanted it to come to this. But with the island itself teetering on the edge of chaos, he knew he had no choice. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and reached deep within himself, to the place where the island's magic lived, intertwined with his own essence. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and a low hum filled the air. The crowd gasped as the very stones of the square began to glow faintly, a soft blue light pulsing from the earth itself. Rook opened his eyes, and they too glowed with the same ethereal light, as if he had become one with the island. "The island's magic is not just in the elements," Rook said, his voice reverberating with a power that wasn't his own. "It is in the earth, the water, the wind, and the very fabric of this place. It has been hidden for centuries, kept in balance by those who came before me. But now that balance is breaking. And if we don't restore it, This island will be torn apart. The crowd stood in stunned silence, the blue light reflecting off their faces. Even Mara and Zephyr seemed shaken, their expressions unreadable as they stared at Rook. Mara, always quick to regain her composure, took a step forward. "If you are truly the island's guardian," she said, her voice calmer now, though still laced with suspicion, "then why have you waited until now to reveal yourself? Why hide your power when we could have used it to strengthen the island?" "Because it's not just about power," Rook replied. "The island's magic isn't something that can be wielded recklessly. It has a will of its own. And if I had revealed myself earlier, it could have caused more harm than good. The balance is delicate, and the wrong move could tip us into disaster." Zephyr frowned, his brow furrowed as he considered Rook's words. "So, what now?" he asked. "What's your plan to stop this storm, and why should we trust you to lead us?" Rook looked out at the people, the fear in their eyes mingling with a flicker of hope. They had come to this election divided, split along elemental lines, with each faction vying for control. But he knew that the only way forward was unity. The island didn't need a leader who would dominate one element over the other, so it needed someone who could bring them all together. "We have to work together," Rook said, turning back to Mara and Zephyr. "Each of you controls an element of the island's magic, but no one person can control it all. If we combine our strength to water, wind, and the island's deeper magical, we can restore the balance and stop this storm." Mara crossed her arms, her expression hard. "And what makes you think we'll trust you enough to work together? You've hidden who you are from all of us." Rook met her gaze evenly. "You don't have to trust me," he said. "But look around. The island is crying out for help. If we don't put aside our differences now, there won't be an island left to govern." For a long moment, neither Mara nor Zephyr spoke. The storm still raged around them, dark clouds swirling ominously overhead. But then, slowly, Mara's shoulders relaxed, and she gave a small nod. "Fine," she said, her voice grudging but firm. "For the sake of the island." Zephyr nodded as well. "Let's do this." Rook felt a surge of relief but knew the hardest part was still ahead. The three of Amici, Wind, and Elanda would need to work in perfect harmony to restore the balance. They moved to the center of the square, the crowd parting to give them space. Rook knelt down, pressing his hands to the glowing stones beneath him, feeling the island's pulse beneath his fingertips. He nodded to Mara and Zephyr. Mara closed her eyes, lifting her arms as the sea answered her call. Water rose from the harbor, streaming through the streets in delicate ribbons, spiraling up into the air like liquid tendrils. Zephyr, his face tense with concentration, summoned the wind, which swirled around the water, lifting it higher and higher into the sky. Rook reached deep, drawing on the island's core magic, channeling it through the stones beneath him and into the earth itself. The ground trembled, and the storm above seemed to pause, as if the island itself were holding its breath. The three forces of water, wind, and earth emerged together, forming a massive vortex of magic that surged upward into the sky. The clouds roared in response, the storm raging even harder for a moment, as if resisting their efforts. But slowly, inch by inch, the swirling clouds began to calm, the winds dying down as the balance was restored. Rook felt the strain deep in his bones, the island's magic pulling at him, testing his resolve. But he held firm, guiding the magic into harmony, until at last, the storm began to fade. The dark clouds broke apart, revealing the pale light of dawn as it crept over the horizon. It was over. The crowd erupted into cheers, the tension that had gripped the island for weeks finally breaking. Mara and Zephyr stepped back, their faces pale with exhaustion, but there was a new respect in their eyes as they looked at Rook. He had done it. They had done it together. But Rook knew that the storm was only the beginning. The island's magic had been saved for now, but the balance remained fragile. And there were still those in the shadows of the syndicate of elements who would stop at nothing to control the island's power for themselves. As the people celebrated around him, Rook's mind was already turning to the future. He had won the election, but the real battle was just beginning. He would have to keep the island safe, not just from the outside forces that sought to control it, but from the magic itself. For as long as the island lived, so too did the magic, and as its guardian, Rook would have to walk the line between leader and protector, between man and myth, between power and peace. But for now, in the soft light of the morning, he allowed himself to smile. The Lassie had chosen him, and together, they would face whatever came next.